Yeah, devices.
Yeah.
It's like here. I mean, sometimes those things works and sometimes doesn't. But especially on when I was working as a guide, when I was doing all these things, those things were not really like right now. We see the people missing in Mount Hood, but it's still hard to find.
Yeah.
It's we are in a Western world with all these devices. But here it's a remote place, and people do bring a lot of those things these days. But 5 years ago, no. So now we are actually right near the base camp, and this is what it's like. All winter it was really snow-filled and ice and all these things. And as the spring comes, slowly, and the ice melts, and and you would see the mushroom like this.
That's a rock on top of ice, isn't it?
Oh, it's a rock, big
Top
rock.
of ice?
Yeah.
What happens when the ice melts?
They probably have to leave before the ice melts.
Short step.
Yeah. Yeah, that same mountain, the guy George Curry, who killed, that's the mountain we are looking at. And right in front of that mountain, it's another little mountain called Kalapatar. Kalapatar actually represents is a black rock. That means so people would climb to that point and take a look at the Mount Everest from there. If you look back, that would be the mountain you would see. And if you look right in front of you, that would be Mount Everest, which we're gonna see this. And that's the picture from that point. And if you go to the Mount Everest base camp, you're not gonna see the top of Mount Everest because you are right under Mount Everest. And so these are the group of people I was with to climb Mount Everest and New England Everest expedition. And we had about 8 of them as a climbing team, and besides some other climbers who wanted to be with the team but didn't have a permit to climb Mount Everest. So there was a total of 16 or 17 of us, but other group, only 8 of them actually had a permit to climb Mount Everest. And with 8, 4 of them made to the summit. It was a very low budget team, and it wasn't really, they didn't have a lot of money at that time, so everything it was done in a low budget, but they had a very good climbing leader, and they had a really good team that supported each other. The people who actually got, who could have climbed to the top, but they gave up only because that at a certain point you just have to wait for a second round. You cannot, when you make your decision on a climbing team that okay, today we're gonna send 4 of you guys to the certain point, and so other 4 would wait for another day or 2 or something like that. So when they make decisions, sometimes the decision would be maybe first group would make the summit and second group not gonna make it, and maybe second group make it the summit and first group probably had to turn around. So that happens up in the mountains all the time. And so before we actually begin our expedition, actually climbing part of the work, this is what happens. Our helpers, Sherpas and porters and all this group, before they turn around, we would have a little celebration. All the mountains around here, people keep it very, it's very part of their life. So they think that in order to climb mountains, you have to keep the mountain god happy. So a little bit of prayer flags and a little bit chanting and all these things has to happen before you actually begin poking your ice axe and things like that on the ice. So, and once that happened, this is what it's like. You see the Mount Everest base camp. It's really crowded with all these different groups. And everybody has their, different type of celebration. Different type means, different group would have a one celebration. So that was our tent, our site. And one side would have one tent would have maybe 2 climbers, and some tent would have a little bit more, like a dining tent, and Sherpas, other climbers tent, maybe more than 2 or 3 people would sleep, things that would happen. It depends on, how big of a space you want to put together there. And sometimes, if the weather permits, you would bring stuff up, and sometimes, if it's a weather not permit, you just wait around. So that's the mountain weather. That's what it is. It's, whether you go and climb Mount Washington here or not, or Mount Everest, it's the same idea, like the weather. If it's a good weather, you can actually go up in the Mount Washington and, do your summit. If not, you just have to wait. Same here, to pitch one tent, because because you are up in a very high elevation, and after 2 weeks, you have a total, you are back here on sea level. That's how much you can get, really feel good, Then after you back up again up in the mountains with all the loads, and you gain elevation. So you do that quite a few times. So get to the base camp, and from there to Camp 1, establish Camp 1, and back to base camp, and get back on Camp 2, and get back on Camp 1, rest again. So you do that quite a few times, and generally all our meetings, all our planning would happen here in a dining tent. And from that point, we would go and climb and bring all our loads up.
The yaks are no longer there?
No longer there. Yaks can get only to the base camp. From base camp up, that's on your own, bringing all the gear. Mostly...
Umesh, you said that if the weather's bad, you can't try to go up to the summit, and you compared it to Mount Washington. With Mount Washington, if the weather's bad on top, people might say, well, let's hike around it, or let's do something different. Here, are people always obsessed with getting to the summit of Everest, as opposed to doing something different?
Yeah, actually, that's a very, very good question. We're going to go and climb some of the mountains while we're waiting for the weather. So people do that here too. Yeah. Not to the Everest, because it's bad weather. You can see this wind blowing up there from the from the side. So if that's the case, then of course, sometimes it's a long period of time waiting. People do go out and climb some other mountain around. That's really still true here in this area, and that's what we're going to be doing here. I'm going to show you that since you mentioned that. We're going to come back to that. And like I said earlier, when you are hiking in a high elevation, or when you're climbing up in a high elevation, it's really retiring. 5 minutes of hike or trek or climb, you resting another 5 minutes. It's really hard. Then once you get used to it, then you can actually run. Yeah. So bringing all this gear up. So now it's come back to our last session of this slide. This type of gear. So you putting back up. My job when I was climbing, when I was helping this team, my job was to make sure all this ladder would get to the right place on right time, and make sure this would set up on time for our climbers to cross and set up a first camp. The difficult section of this whole climbing is Khumbu Ice Fall, which is also known as death zone and things like that. Once you fall into this type of crevasse, and it's very, very hard for anyone to survive. Anyway, so we'll get into that a little more details a little bit later. So at this point, we're trying to, earlier you saw the slide of,
This is where I asked, who was the first one across the ladder?
Yeah.
Was it you?
Yeah, that's me. That's me. So I was basically, if I really have to put together the word, it would be captain of this area for me. They would say, okay, they would listen to me. I would have 6 other helpers, sometimes more, helpers to help me, bring all these things up And so once we establish this ladder, I would be the one cross it and make sure it's nicely, screwed. Ice screws we use.
How far down?
If you,
That's one of the
we have tried this. I can't really, I can tell you maybe approximate, how deep it would be. And when I throw a piece of little rock, I can hear maybe quite a few seconds.
Well, now, were you roped?
When I said a few seconds, I would say maybe 6-7 seconds.
But were you roped, Umesh?
Huh?
Did you have a rope on you?
Well, I do not have a rope myself when I cross. But later what I would do is, you're gonna see we have a rope in between, at least just to hold it so you can yourself balance in the middle.
Now, how did you put that thing across the river?
Magic.
Yeah, magic. Yeah. You put together first, then after you let go, like you would do with any ladder. You would have a long rope, and you let go, and once you get to the other side, and you cross, and you have all these devices to nicely screwed and tied it up.
Just like that.
No wonder he runs a coffee shop.
And some section you would have crossing, and some section a little bit of climbing like this. Most of the climbers, they're okay to climb, without the ladder in some section, but it's okay to put the ladder up sometime, because it will take a long time, and if you cannot cross this section on time, it's not really dangerous because of the timing. So in a smaller section like this, we would have a ladder up sometime.
Isn't that the spot where you need to do most of the climbing at nighttime?
Say it again, I didn't hear.
You do most of the climbing at nighttime through this area?
No. It starts bright and early. So sometime we would leave 2 in the morning, and sometime we would leave a little bit later, 3. Mostly, after midnight.
But it's dark when you start that.
Yeah. There's another reason for that, because the wind actually takes place after noon. So you really you don't want to be around here when the actual wind is blowing.
And you have to carry that ladder all the way with you.
All the way there, and once it's established, then so that's me crossing the first cross, testing it out.
Can't you trip with those spikes?
Well, you would get used to it, and
This is on the way to Camp 2?
Camp 1.
Oh, Camp 1?
Yeah, from Camp 1 to the Camp 4, you don't have to do this. It's just a traverse, and basically you're on the snow and rock and ice. So now you can actually really see on the side, once established, on the side you have a little bit of balance rope there, so when you are crossing, so you kind of balance yourself. And like I said earlier, once you are up in Camp 1 and 2, once you are acclimatized, I see people running on this. Yeah, at the beginning it's really hard. And just tell you the one story about one of our expedition member. He used to practice his sports medicine up in Haverhill. He was one of our doctor, and he crossed 1 or 2 ladder and returned to the base camp. He doesn't want to go up anymore. So it happens. It scares people very, very much. Then he returned home. He didn't stay there, and it was lucky for us that there was 2 doctors in our expedition at that time, and other one stayed and went on to climb Mount Everest later, because he didn't make it on this time to the summit. So other doctor came back. Now he doesn't practice up in Haverhill, so I can actually tell his name, but now he's in Utah.
And how many outhouses are there on the way up?
That's what the crevasses are for.
Yeah.
Don't eat